Hello, fellow humans. How much wealth is too much wealth? How do we know when we have enough? Should we stop wanting more money and more wealth? I would like to make a case that all economic problems we have today, from the climate disaster to inflation, inequality, poverty, low wages, debts, and so on, are caused by an economic system that is incapable of functioning within limits. And perhaps the solution to the climate crisis, to wars, to economic inequality, is to think about creating material limits to our lives. And I mean both lower limits and upper limits. Let us see what they are. By lower limits, I mean something along the line of a minimum guaranteed living wage on which all citizens can live a decent life with proper housing, nutrition, and ability to participate in society. For example, in North America, this minimum should be at around $25 per hour, and in Europe, at about 20 euros per hour. A minimum standard for access to free healthcare for all humans, no questions asked. Access to free education at least until age 22, no questions asked. A right to clean air, clean water, and clean land. I'm sure you get the idea. By upper limits, I mean, should we have billionaires or even multimillionaires? How many houses should one human possess? How much land should one human possess? How much carbon emissions should one human be permitted to emit into the air? We live in an economic system that has not answered these questions and continues to refuse to answer the questions. Meanwhile, OXFAM has recently published a report titled Inequality Kills. The report says the wealth of the 10 richest men has doubled in 1 year, while the incomes of 99% of humanity are worse off because of COVID-19. 252 men have more wealth than all 1 billion women and girls in Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean combined. 3.4 million Black Americans would be alive today if their life expectancy was the same as white people's. Before COVID-19, that alarming number was already 2.1 million. Inequality contributes to the death of at least one person every 4 seconds. Since 1995, the top 1% have captured nearly 20 times more of global wealth than the bottom 50% of humanity. 20 of the richest billionaires are estimated on average to be emitting as much as 8,000 times more carbon than the billion poorest people. From these numbers and so many more, too many to mention here, we learn that limitless greed, limitless desire for power over other people is causing incredible suffering. Capitalists and many governments claim that it is very expensive to solve all the problems. Yet, in the past 2 years, we have seen that there is no shortage of money. That lie vanished when governments released $16 trillion to respond to the pandemic. The money saved the ruling elite, the corporations, the banks, but not the people. Apparently, there's plenty of money to save capitalism, but never enough money to save life. Capitalism is not amoral, as it has been suggested, meaning it has nothing to say about ethics and morality, about what is right and what is wrong. Looking at the OXFAM report, I would like to suggest the opposite, which is capitalism does have a moral dimension because it has a consequence on people's well-being, relationships in society, and the values that are promoted or discarded, such as greed is good, unlimited wealth is good, obnoxious consumption is good. If we look at what capitalism is causing, can we say that it is not an evil economic system that causes suffering deprivation, unhappiness? Should we accept only the success stories in capitalism and forget about the suffering? Should we forget that many success stories in capitalism hide a dark truth of exploitation, destruction, and theft? This is the moral dimension of the economic system today. Can we say that all this is happening because the system has not been tamed enough? That it has not learned limits? That it does not know when enough is enough? The OXFAM report suggests 3 simple solutions which are not new. Number 1, claw back extreme wealth into the real economy to tackle inequality. For example, a 99% one-off windfall tax on the COVID-19 wealth gains of the 10 richest men alone would generate $812 billion. Number 2, redirect that wealth to save lives and invest in our future. This can mean many things. Perhaps Elon Musk should live up to his promise and give away those billions he pledged for the eradication of hunger. He conveniently forgot about it. Number 3, change rules and shift power in the economy and society. This is a huge proposal. It could mean, for example, dismantling the pyramids of power inside corporations to make managers and executives accountable to workers, not to the board of directors. In other words, create democracy at work. By now, for most of you out there, it may be self-evident that the ruling class will not give up their power, wealth, and privileges willingly. They will not accept limits of any kind. The ruling class has never, not once, gave up power and privileges willingly. It had to be taken away by the people every single time. As it has happened many times in history, over and over again, it rests with us, the people, to impose limits on the ruling class. We could start small, then move to disobedience, to rebellion, and then to something else. What can each of us do about limits? Here's a selection of ideas. 1. Maybe we should not work for capitalists, if we can. Or if we do, maybe we should try our best not to make them richer. We should maybe not exploit other employees to make the owners of the company richer. Exploitation comes in many subtle forms, from wage theft, from influencing employees to work longer hours with the subtle promise of a promotion, and so on. Number 2, if some of us are young, at the beginning of our career, and we have never worked for a capitalist corporation, perhaps we shouldn't. We could search instead to work with a worker cooperative, or in the public sector, or for a non-profit. We could try to find organizations that operate on democratic principles. Democracy, however, can be a tricky thing. Even non-profits can be exploitative if leaders are not elected democratically. Democracy literally means power of the people, not power that I do whatever I want. We could all speak our minds, we could all talk with our peers, we could forge consensus, we could persuade with good arguments and facts. We could even change our minds when others make a better argument. The time of the kings at the workplace is gone. So should the time of unaccountable leaders be gone. Number 3, if you reach a wage of $100,000 per year or a market wealth of $3 million, perhaps you should stop. Maybe it's a good idea not to seek to make more. Maybe it's good to live your life instead of working your life to make few humans very rich. Perhaps it would be more fun, more interesting and enlightening to do something socially useful. But why these amounts and not $1 million per year or $1 billion maximum wealth? I would say, why not? Nobody needs intrinsically that much to live. We could use inequality reports like OXFAM or the World Inequality Database to realize that an income of $100,000 per year is more than enough for any human on earth to live. But these limits do not go alone. The gap from the lowest wage to the highest wage is right now about 300 times, or sometimes 1,000 times. Perhaps this is also too much. Perhaps a gap of 6 times from the lowest wage to the highest wage would be enough to recognize differences in merit and effort while maintaining a reasonable level of inequality. If these numbers make some people cringe, like they are maybe too low, I would like to remind them there are billions of humans that probably do agree with these limits quite strongly, and there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of books and articles over many decades of serious research that support these limits. Number 4, perhaps being financially independent is knowing your lower and upper limits. There are a lot of financial gurus and con artists on YouTube who have secret recipes on how to get rich with Bitcoin or gold or the stock market, or how to turn yourself into a brand. If you only bought a $500 course from them, you could own the keys to your independence. Just look on the street. It's full of financially independent people. There are so many. They are all screaming of happiness. You can be one of them. There are many guidelines to live within material limits. This report from the Hot or Cool Institute gives exact numbers of when a house is too big, how many kilometers driven in a personal car is too much, how much meat is too much, buying how many things is too much. I made a video about this. Or we can look at this report from staygrounded.org to see that not flying in private jets and even commercial flying too much is perhaps a very good idea among many other good ideas that we all know and we have all heard over and over again in the past 50 years. Perhaps the single strongest argument in favor of material limits is Earth itself. Earth is limited. Our needs are growing too fast for what the planet can provide. We passed those limits already because of the abuse of the ruling class, the richest of the rich. There is unfortunately no nice way to say this, but the ruling class has started a war against us, regular humans. It's not always with guns and tanks, but it is a war of lifestyles and a war about limits. Our path towards a good life on Earth for all of us can begin with knowing that lower and upper material limits are something good, something to embrace with joy and desire. This is probably the most difficult endeavor in the history of civilization. I believe it's worth it. I would like to thank my Patreon community for helping me stay independent and ad-free. This is still a small channel, but it is growing. Slowly, because I'm not selling you anything whatsoever. If you can support this channel, you can learn how to do just that by visiting my Patreon page at patreon.com/Vlad Bunea. The best and easiest way to support the channel via YouTube is by clicking the subscribe button below. It's very free and it makes a big difference for the YouTube algorithm. Have a great week, everyone.